want to say that the mayor is extremely excited about the slate of our candidates that are before you. We have a diverse slate of folks with very professional backgrounds, from former operations head at Volkswagen to community advocates to folks who worked in economic development, and a broad range of perspectives and skill sets. And the mayor has put a lot of effort and intention into assembling this board, in part because we do have a real opportunity to really make sure that as we grow in the community, as economic development opportunities continue to fill our pipeline, as jobs continue to come to our community, that we have the opportunity to connect people to those jobs, that our city is a place where everybody can home. I do want to specifically recognize and thank Lisa, who is here with us today, who has guided part of this time. And as she transitions, she's setting up a transition that will allow her to be able to really provide input as we look for a new permanent leader for CARTA. And part of that work is really making sure that this board is equipped and capable to rise to that challenge. So I'm really proud of this the board roster that we present to the council, and we will appreciate approval, and we think that there's a lot of important work to be done ahead. So
I'm just.
The code actually talks about litter in connection with litter and overgrowth under the property maintenance section, so it says it could be illegal dumping ground. Yeah.
Who's a regular rider of the caravan and brings an important perspective to the board. And I want to be very clear too. These are 5-year terms, and the board term expiration that came up for these 9 members is a vast majority of the board. And as the mayor was looking through the roster and also the available pool of talent that we could really pull in with the mayor making and increase the board, we really want to make sure that we get the right mix of board members to lead this organization in a direction that is going to allow our administration and our city to achieve the economic development goals and our connection and our goals to connect more with our community. So that has really been the primary lens in which we looked at assembling these folks. So it was a thoughtful process where we looked at resumes and talked to individual board members, and there is kind of a range of engagement depending on the individual board itself. And I'd say this is on the higher end of engagement. There we very hands-on in assembling these folks. And we certainly did look at everybody who is available, and particularly with the focus on the folks who were currently serving on the board. By bringing some new energy to this board, the mayor does feel like we can have some serious momentum as we head into.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Hill?
Thank you, Chair. I have a comment about something else, but I'm glad that Councilman Henderson brought up the Carter Board as it's coming on to our 2-week agenda. I had mentioned when we saw it on future considerations that what a dynamic group of people, and I can tell the great work about them. So thank you again for bringing that group to us. But Chairman, the reason I had my light on was just to put a finer point on the fact that on our 2-week agenda, though not necessarily in our attendance copy, is the short-term vacation rental ordinance. It will be on first read next week. And everyone has received a copy of that in their box. And so we can have the 2-week agenda adjusted for the record, so that the public knows that that is going to be coming up.
Thank you for announcing that again, as we covered that and did discuss that in strategic planning as well. So I appreciate you bringing that back up. Councilman Smith, I saw your light, and then
I'm good, sir.
I would activate you, but I don't think you have a microphone, so.
It really doesn't matter, but thanks for hitting the button.
Yeah, I'll go through the motion. How about that?
Yeah, thank you, sir. I turned my light off. I do have questions related to the CARTA item as well, but there's a little bit more research that I'm going to do before next week. before I bring those questions forward. Thank you.
Very good, sir. Thank you. Any other questions or comments on next week's proposed agenda? I just wanted to ask a quick question of the city attorney to confirm this for me. Under legal item A, thank you, Dr. Burrs, for allowing that to for the AHO to cover litter and overgrowth. That does cover illegal dumping.
Yes, sir.
And I wanted to make sure that that also was a part of that ordinance, because I think it goes hand in hand with some of the issues we're experiencing. So,
Yes, sir.
thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we'll take a look at purchases, council, and hit your light. And I'll just give you the nod since I can't give you the mic. There was a question I had on human resource item that I think was clarified. That's a fairly large number of $2.7 million, and that was, that wasn't, the question I had was that the fund or the bucket that was used to pay out and the fees associated with managing that bucket? And the answer, I believe, is someone can confirm that. Julia, are you coming? I'll let you answer that, but I think the answer was yes, correct? Okay.
It is. So the number that you're seeing, the total number that had previously been approved by this council is both for the claims as well as for the third-party administration. The increase that you see there is specifically associated with us closing out claims from our previous third-party administrator, and that's why we had to increase the overall cost.
Okay.
Our claims are, however, trending down, which is what we would like to see. So
Okay. That was a really, thank you for that, and I appreciate you answering that question. Council, any other questions on our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 purchases this evening? Seeing none, we do have a contract renewal. We have no emergency purchases and no RFPs and 2 sole source to report this evening. So moving into future considerations, if you would, take a look at our 3-week outlook. I will symbolically hit your light, Madam Vice Chair.
So I had a question under planning item A. Karen. For this particular item, we're entering into an agreement for area plans for unincorporated Hamilton County. So could you give more information on that, as we are the city of Chattanooga?
Sure, I'll give a little bit of an overview. The city, on behalf of the RPA, issued RFPs for city area plans and then incorporated county area plans. We've heard quite a bit about this from Dan over the past few months. Consultants have been selected. We have a draft contract for the county area plans and are ready to move forward if funding is approved. That's for this resolution. The consultant for the county area plans for the resolution is proposed to be Reagan Smith in the amount of $516,000 with a 10% contingency. We had planned to move forward with the city area plan consultant at the same time, but there is some additional coordination with that firm on their contract, and Kevin Bartonfield gave an update this morning, which I appreciate, saying they're still addressing some final questions with that consultant, but hope to be ready for us to move forward on that soon. There isn't a draft contract, but the proposed contract amount is going to be, for the city area plans, $1,119,000 plus contingency. So that is a few weeks behind. So again, moving forward on the county, which is on your agenda for $516,000. Hopefully, in a week or two, the city area planning process will pop up, and that'll be proposed to be $1,119,000. Both of these funds for both of these planning efforts are coming from the RPA Reserve Fund. And I tried to make that clear on the resolution form, but if it's not clear enough, I'm happy to clarify that. The RPA's interlocal agreement discusses what should be happen with the RPA's Reserve Fund. And I'll just mention it states that reserve funds will be used to finance consultant costs or other service costs related to necessary and needed planning projects as determined by the executive committee. So the executive committee has determined that reserve funds should be used for the city and county planning efforts. The interlocal agreement also states that the city is the fiscal agent. We abide by all the city policies the agency does. So it's a little unusual, but it's coming through so that we can expend those reserve funds for this project. It's just kind of unfortunate that they don't match up with the city area planning being on the same agenda.
In both parties, in both the county and the city put into this particular fund balance.
That's correct. I don't have how many decades that reserve fund has been building, but yes, it has been building over a substantial period of time.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Karen, and the county pays into this fund almost $1 million a year, 900,000?
The county pays the regional planning agency per the interlocal agreement that is stated. Also, and for the current interlocal agreement, which is FY '23 through '27, county will fund RPA at $847,406, increasing no more than 2% each fiscal year. And every year that we've had an interlocal agreement in place, the county has funded, we get a monthly check from the county.
Thank you. Any other, Councilwoman Hill, I see your symbolic light.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about legal item, or Office of the City Attorney, item A. Just would like some additional information about this agreement that we're changing in the Erlanger Health System.
The agreement with Erlanger Health Systems in the early 1970s, the Chattanooga-Hamilton County Hospital Authority was created by the city and the county. It was a private act at that point in time. There was a provision in there that property came from both the city and the county. The provision said in that document that if it ever, ceased to be an organization under state law, then that property could go back to the city or county based upon the items and amounts that were owed on that property at that time. The issue here at this point in time, Erlanger Health is no longer going to be Chattanooga-Hamilton County Hospital Authority. It's no longer a governmental entity in that regard. It will continue to be a nonprofit serving the residents of our area, and they have requested that we waive that amount of property coming back to the city. And that's an issue that will come before the board in connection with that resolution.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hill. Any other questions on future considerations? Seeing none, we have no department reports this afternoon. We will have two committees, Parks and Public Works and Planning and Zoning. And I believe Chairman, you're here. All right. Very good. Good to see you, sir. Chairman Hester, are you ready for, Parks and Public Works is on our agenda next, so if you're ready. All right. Just leave it there. Land on the microphone. Chair, need your call? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome to Parks and Public Works Committee. Can we accept the minutes?
Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, can you read ordinance 5C, please?
An ordinance closing and abandoning a portion of the unopened right-of-way adjacent to the 1500 block of South Lyerly Street as detailed on the attached map, subject to certain conditions.
I see no hands. Resolution 7, please. 7C.
A resolution authorizing the Department of Public Works to erect commemorative secondary street name signs on West 46th Street from Tennessee Avenue to the dead-end designation of this section of West 46th Street as commemorative Doris Bruce Kelly Way.
I see no hands. Resolution 7B, please.
A resolution authorizing the Chattanooga Parks and Outdoors to award Tennessee Rainbow Pops LLC the concessions contract to provide reasonably priced concessions at various recreation programs and events.
I see no hands. C, please.
A resolution authorizing an amendment to Resolution Number 31421 to change the legal name of AstroTurf Corporation to AstroTurf Construction Corporation, which is a subsidiary company to the original entity and is contracting entity that is licensed in the state of Tennessee to perform said work.
D, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to approve change order number 1 with Integrated Properties LLC of Chattanooga, Tennessee for contract number C17017-201, wood recycle new facility to reconcile the current contract with revised pricing for holding price for additional time, conduit, and cabling for temporary scale, quantity overrun for demolition of concrete and asphalt, floor leveling of existing flooring, and other planned changes to increase by $132,757.59 for a revised amount of $1,790,141.24, with a contingency amount of $80,000 for a total amount of $1,870,141.24.
Thank you. I see no hands. E, please. E and F, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to award contract number M22001-201, Mayor's Conference Room to Integrated Properties LLC of Chattanooga, Tennessee, in the amount of $170,904, with a contingency in the amount of $20,000, for a total amount of $199,904. A resolution authorizing 5-year term for the on-call blanket contract for on-call design and plan production services, contract number S20004-100 with the following firms: W.K. Dixon, Volcourt, Barge Design, S&ME, RK&K, Geosyntec, CTI, Croy, Chazen, Brown and Caldwell, Arcadis, that each consultant qualified for the renewal of the 5 one-year blanket contracts for professional services estimated at $1,050,000 total annually for all 11 professional firms for use by all departments.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I see no hands. We went blank, so see no hands. Next, we have up Planning and Zoning Committee. Thank you. Excuse me.
Okay, I call to order the Planning and Zoning Committee. May I get a motion on the minutes? Thank you. Okay, everybody. In your packet, you have our Planning and Zoning rundown that has the highlights of the items that we plan to discuss today. Other than the highlighted items, are there any cases on this rundown that you would like to see a presentation for? I'm going to scan. All right. Vice Chair Dotley?
Yes, item E to 2023-0014.
Okay, thank you. That's item E, 2023-0014. Okay. And Councilman Smith? 0017. The first one? Oh, 17, done, okay. So that's item B 0017, Karen. Okay, and then, Karen, could you join us? And before we get started, we actually have some older business that is not on the agenda that we're going to need to get added back in. Case number 2022-0199 is a case that was deferred in District 6 by Councilwoman Burrs back in December. And it was to be deferred until February, but it has not appeared on the agenda again. I don't think that Councilwoman Burrs actually has all the information that she needs yet to proceed with that case. So if that's something that you could circle back with the applicant, make sure that she gets what she needs.
I will.
Okay. Okay, we good? All right, terrific. So Karen, did you get that item B, D, E, H, I, K, L, M and 007 are what we're going to go through today.
I think so.
Okay. We're a team. We'll get through it
Yes,
together.
if I miss one, let me know. And I'll note that, just in case, excuse me.
And as she's pulling that up, I would like to point out for everyone that in addition to having the standard zoning cases that we're going to be considering, Karen also is going to be talking us through 2 ordinance changes that we are going to be considering. We have discussed them already in strategic planning, so you'll be familiar with them, but we'll shine a light on them. Councilwoman Coonrod? Oh, sorry, I thought you were waving. Okay.
If I could get assistance with the pointer to control the slides, I would appreciate it.
And we have no graphics on our screens either.
Turn this on.
I'm not saying there's no user here.
There we go. Oh, sure, think of that.
All right, our screens are looking great. Thank you, guys.
I'm happy to start if someone on the IT team wants to just move forward.
They gave us
Okay.
a thumbs up on that.
The last slide you saw showed that case 2023-003 on Chambers Road was withdrawn. This is just if someone's tracking a case to understand. It was recommended for denial at Planning Commission, and the applicant withdrew the case 3 days after the Planning Commission meeting, so it was never appeared on a council agenda. But just to note that that activity happened. So we do have 10 zoning cases, 3 have opposition. 1 comes with a recommendation from Planning Commission to deny. The 2 ordinance amendments, both of these were discussed at strategic planning. One's the hotel motel conversion. One is the bringing duplexes back into conformity, and then a planned unit development, which also had opposition. I'll start with the next case is on Jenkins. The first case discusses 6D 2023-0016 on Jenkins Road.
Could we look at case B, or do we need to come back to that?
Yes, I have them set up for all the ones, and then we'll have to swing back by them.
Okay, all right,
That
that's
might
fine.
not be the best way to do it, so I'll try to rethink that for the next one.
Okay, all right, so
Starting
Councilman
with all
Smith
the
will
ones
come
that had opposition at Planning Commission are recommended deny, and then I'll catch back up with the other cases.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is request to rezone 2341 Jenkins Road from R1 to RTZ Residential Townhouse Zero Lot Line Zone to develop 6 attached townhomes on individual lots with a density a little over 6 dwelling units an acre. Apologize. I think I just need to be more firm. So the property is on Jenkins, just north of Shallowford Road, and immediately adjacent to the site is a townhouse development, and rezoning of this property would be an extension of the existing RTZ zone on the western side of Jenkins. So the property at Brown surrounding the site's in red, is the RTZ zone. So this would be an extension of that existing zone. The surrounding land use is single-family residential development and townhomes. Excuse me, I've not got the hang of this. With vacant lots. The proposed RTZ zone is compatible with those adjacent land uses. So there was opposition present at Planning Commission, and most of the comments were for the neighbors from Legacy Park Court, which is the development to the south of the site. But both staff and Planning Commission found that the request is compatible with adjacent land uses and development form as an extension of the RTZ zone. So it comes with a recommendation to approve, subject to 1 curb cut along Jenkins and a maximum of 4 units per massed building, and that is just to help with the compatibility in that area.
Okay, moving on. There's no
Thank you, Chair.
questions.
Doesn't look like do you have any questions? Nope, okay, thank you.
And I don't know if this is still working or someone is moving slides. So 2109 Ralston Street is a request to rezone from R1 to RTZ Residential Townhouse Zero Lot Line Zone to develop urban infill housing with 4 units. In this case, had no opposition at Planning Commission, but it does come with a Planning Commission recommendation to deny, so I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. The site was part of a rezoning study in the Orchard Knob, Churchville neighborhoods that was rezoned from R3 to R1 many years ago. And the light yellow on the map is the R1 zone, so you see the area and all the surrounding property is zoned R1. Development form along Ralston Streets includes historic lots of record with single-family detached dwellings. And just to note that Ralston Street does not support on-street parking due to the street width, both the narrow street width and narrow right-of-way width. The site is immediately surrounded by single-family detached residential uses. There are some existing duplexes along Cleveland Avenue to the south of the site. The Area 3 Historic River to Ridge Plan, adopted in 2020, recommends urban residential single-family place type for the site. And that's an overlay in the plan. We don't speak about it too often because it's not very prevalent in the plan, but this is an overlay which describes the primary use being single-family detached dwelling. So much of the Area 3 plan really discusses a mix of residential housing types, but we did have some neighborhoods that weren't quite ready to introduce different housing types. So the overlay shows those areas where it's intended to maintain single-family form. The staff recommendation was to deny because of the overlay, and staff noted the parcel is made up of 2 lots of record, which would allow for development of a single-family dwelling and ADU on each lot. And the development form would meet the Area 3 plan goals and allow for those 4 units which the applicant's requesting. So essentially, staff is saying 4 units could be developed with single-family home and an ADU. There was an opposition present at Planning Commission, but Planning Commission had a similar determination. And because the site is located in that overlay in the plan, that single-family detached overlay, as noted in the plan, and to support the plan recommendation, Planning Commission is recommending denial for this rezoning.
Thank you, Karen. All right, let's see here. Councilwoman Knoll.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I spoke with the residents in Churchville area, and they were in favor of if it was going to be a single-family home or 2 single-family dwellings, but they were wanting to make it 2-story, I think 4 townhomes, and they said no, which it was not going to work there well anyway. So in turn, I spoke with the developer as well, and he has said to me he's going to withdraw.
Okay. I see no other questions, so.
The next case is case 2023-0013 at 1913 and 1915 South Kelly Street. It's a request to rezone from R2 residential zone and C5 neighborhood commercial zone to UGC. The proposal is to develop 26-unit apartment building. The case had opposition at Planning Commission. Planning Commission did encourage the applicant and the opposition to meet after the meeting. They did meet, and I believe are in agreement to the zoning with some additional conditions, and I will bring those up as we go along. And I'm sorry, should I just say next slide, or am I, okay. If we could just move forward a couple slides. 2 more, please. Okay. So a portion of the site was rezoned from R2 residential zone to C5 commercial zone in 1980. So the site's comprised of that R2 residential zone and C5 neighborhood commercial zone, and that was a factor that went to the staff recommendation. So 26 units proposed on 0.31 acres. Next slide, please. The The site is surrounded by a mix of uses, including vacant land, single-family residences, two-family residences, a school, commercial uses, and a warehouse wholesaling use, so kind of a mix in the area. The existing zoning in the area would allow for varied manufacturing, multifamily, residential, small-scale uses, and there is a vacant 3-acre site across the street that is zoned R3 and C2. So there's a larger site across South Kelly Street, which has, although vacant, has zoning that allows both that R3 multifamily and C2 convenience commercial use. So the proposed UGC zone would be compatible with a mix of uses and zones in the area, but staff recommended there should be conditions related to use and height and ensure compatibility with the surrounding uses, including the single family. So staff found that the proposal is compatible with land uses and development form. It does not meet the secondary use criteria in the plan, so it's not specifically supported by the plan, but the surrounding zoning and uses are compatible with the higher density development. So the plan is a factor, but because of the unusual, I guess, unusually large mix of uses and zones in this area, this was a factor in the plan. So next slide. One more, please. This is the site plan originally proposed. I'm showing this because you'll see South Kelly Street, and then the gray is the driveway to the site that's accessing off the alley. On the other side of the alley is the Chattanooga Charter School, and this came into play in the discussion at Planning Commission, and you'll see these in the proposed conditions. Next slide. So just to orient, the site is South Kelly will be to the right of this, the site, the alley, and the charter school. So it's all kind of close in here together. Next slide. Opposition was concerned about the safety of the school, parking, use of the alley, because the school does use the alley. Planning Commission did recommend approval for residential uses only, maximum building height of 3 stories, and encouraged the applicant and the school to continue discussions. Next slide. Applicant Alan Jones provided some information saying they've met with the Chattanooga Charter School of Excellence and would like to add some additional conditions. Next slide. So the additional conditions are the 10-foot rear setback, no parking allowed in the alley, primary entrance off Kelly Street, dumpster service shall use the primary entrance, and the alley shall remain free and clear at all times, especially during construction. That alley was a big concern with the school, just making sure that what was going on in that transition area. So we also received some email communication from Ted Griffin, the COO for the school, that the school is in agreement with the conditions presented going forward. So the proposed ordinance reflects the Planning Commission conditions, the residential uses only, maximum building height of 3 stories, but does not reflect the applicant's additional proposed conditions.
Thank you, Karen. Councilwoman Knoll, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just happy to see that there was a meeting of the minds. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next case is case 2023-0018, 1605 Dodds Avenue. We did have an opposition email related to just supporting single-family development, but no one came to Planning Commission and spoke in greater detail. It's a request to rezone from R2 to UGC Urban General Commercial to bring an existing quadruplex into compliance. The applicant state the structure is being repaired and there's going to be no increase in floor area. Next slide, and two more slides. One more, please. And that's just to show the existing structure that they're trying to bring in conformity. I believe that their application materials said they've been advised by DRP to seek rezoning. The site's in the historic River to Ridge area plan, which recommends mixed-use corridor place type. One of the primary uses in that place type is multifamily residential. The site's surrounded by a variety of uses, and the UGC zone is compatible with the goals of the plan, and with the mix of development. The surrounding development form is A mix of small urban lots and multifamily dwellings along with some small-scale commercial on Dodds. The site is also adjacent to the Milltown development, which has a varied form, including historic structures, townhomes, and associated parking. So this comes with a recommendation from Planning Commission for approval of the UGC zone with conditions: residential uses only, maximum of 4 residential units, and maximum building height of 2.5 stories or 35 feet. And again, we're trying to use that urban general commercial zone for our kind of residential infill tool, which is why we have those conditions. And if the slides progress, you'll see those as part of that.
Councilwoman Coonrod, you good? Okay, thank you. All right, Karen, we're good?
Okay, a few more slides. We'll get to case C, which is under the resolutions. So this is a special exceptions permit for a residential planned unit development. And the applicants described his proposal as detached micro dwellings. The community will include walking trails, dog park, community gardens, solar lighting, and solar roofs, and will be developed using a horizontal property regime. So this is in the Eastdale community. Moving forward a few slides. Just a few more. So the R1 zone on the last slide is in that light yellow. The proposal is to, if we go back one more, the proposal is to develop a planned unit development using that R1 zone. The proposal is 8.5 acres, a little less than 8.5 acres with 46 units. So the density number is a little bit higher than 5, but the PUD requirements will keep the maximum density at 5 dwelling units an acre. Next slide. The surrounding land uses consist of single-family residential. The proposed PUD shows single-family residential uses. And one of the benefits of the PUD in this case, if the applicant wants to change the PUD to include any other residential type, they'd be required to apply for an amendment to the PUD. Next slide. The proposed PUD shows 33.6 acres of open green space that is accessible to the residents. A portion of the site contains slope with an approximately 25 to 45% grade, and this area is preserved in one of the open spaces, and the open space is shown in green on the site plan. Next slide. The site is located within the Eastdale plan, but the plan doesn't provide specific land use recommendations for this property. The plan does discuss that new developments should be designed to fit in with the surrounding neighborhood, and that the predominant land use in Eastdale is single-family housing with some duplexes and apartments scattered throughout the community. So staff had recommended a condition for single-family detached units only, and with parking areas not to be within the perimeter to help with some of that compatibility based on the plan recommendation. There was opposition at Planning Commission from several of the neighbors. There was a concern about access to property. This one's a little unusual. Someone was accessing this site to get to their property. Concern about crime, lower property values, traffic, too many units. Planning Commission found the request is compatible with the plan, adjacent land uses and development form. There's quite a bit of discussion about allowing additional housing. And it comes with the Planning Commission recommendation to approve the PUD with the conditions shown.
Thank you, Karen. Do you have any questions on this?
No.
Okay, all right, great.
Okay, so then a few more slides and we'll get to case 6B, which is case 2023-0017. Okay, this is a request it Shelby Circle in Middle Valley to rezone from R1 zone, R4 special zone, RT1 residential townhouse zone with conditions to RT1 residential townhouse zone with conditions developed townhomes. That is because there's been a lot of activity on the site. Council has seen some variation of these properties multiple times over the years. Next slide, two more slides, here we go. Back one, if you don't mind. As mentioned, there have been several zoning cases at the site. The staff report summarizes the current zoning and allowable uses, just because there's been so much activity and has been in the past quite a bit of concern and interest in these areas. But just to note, there's a current R1 zone that would allow 6 single-family detached dwellings. There's an R4 zone that allows approximately 19 dwelling units an acre. The R4 zone also allows non-residential uses such as offices and banks. And that current RT1 zone allows for 8 attached townhomes and 3 single-family dwellings. And this was just an attempt to say there's a lot of zones and a lot of potential uses there now allowed by the current zoning. Next slide. The Hickson North River Plan recommends low-density residential uses for this area. So that's predominantly single-family detached homes. There is a goal in the plan to create younger home ownership and senior housing opportunities. And so staff noted the request, while slightly more dense than the adjacent low-density residential development, provides housing diversity that would promote attainable housing opportunities for younger home ownership and senior housing, and also pointing back to the allowable mix of uses there already. The site is surrounded by single-family residences, multifamily residences, townhomes, and some small-scale commercial uses. The proposed RT1 zone is compatible with the mix of uses in the area, and the surrounding development is consistent with an area that is transitioning from a rural residential development pattern to more suburban residential development pattern. There are currently townhomes located on the corner of Middle Valley Road and Shelby, and their request is compatible with surrounding development form. So staff recommended with some conditions. Planning Commission had a similar finding. Next slide, please. This comes with a Planning Commission recommendation to approve maximum of 26 units, maximum of 4 units per massed building. That is something that's been coming out of our planning efforts that keeps a townhouse development a little bit more compatible, so it's not like a string of 12 townhomes. There'll only be 1 entrance for ingress and egress. There'll be no more than one from Shelby Circle, no more than one from Middle Valley, and a 20-foot type B landscape buffer where the property abuts the R1 zone. We did not have Planning Commission, opposition present at Planning Commission, but this has been an active site over the years.
Thank you, Karen. Councilman Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Karen. You've really covered everything already in the presentation. Yes, there has been a tremendous amount of opposition with past plans. So I appreciate the level of detail that you've gone into here. Do you know if the developer has met with the neighborhood association in the area?
I don't know. I don't remember. Okay. I don't know if it was mentioned. We haven't had any communication that I'm aware of since Planning Commissioned.
Okay.
So just normally we hear a lot of engagement from the community and zoning cases in this area, and we just haven't heard that for this one.
I will want to make sure that does occur.
And I'm happy to follow up with the developer.
If you would just let them know, I'm happy to give you or the developer, if they don't already have it, the contact for the people that they need to talk to that have been very interested in this area. But considering the differences in this and what I've seen in the past, this may be very amenable to finally a good solution for what will eventually go in that place. So, yeah, if you would just confirm with that and let me know, that'd be great.
I will.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, couple more slides moving forward. I believe the other case, is case 15 on the agenda to discuss? Sure. No,
14.
Okay. It's
item E, 2023-0014, please.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay. This is a site in Southside Gardens. It's a rezoning for multifamily dwellings, 300 units, which is quite a bit, but next slide. This also is a large property, about 4.5 acres. It's a mix of zoning of C3, UGC, and R3. And the UGC zone is along Broad Street. That was through a zoning study, and then there's been quite a few rezonings to UGC. Much of the Southside Gardens is R3. So the zoning on the site kind of reflects the zoning in the area. There is a mix of uses in the area, including commercial, institutional, single-family residential, and duplexes. This proposed multifamily development to the north of the site at 2525 William Street, and the surrounding development form is a mix of large commercial developments, urban single-family dwellings and duplexes, and institutional lots with associated parking. There's been quite a bit of zoning activity in the site. The 2018 South Broad District Study recommends single-family housing, mixed housing, medium intensity, and mixed housing high intensity for the site, just depending on kind of where it is located on the street frontages. And the variety in that residential is based on context and location, but includes variations in building type, height, placement, and massing. The intent of the rezoning is to bring the site under one zoning type, because right now it's 3 different zoning types. Staff found the proposed development is compatible with South Broad District Plan, surrounding land uses and development form, and the evolving Southside Gardens neighborhood. The recommendation the request had been for C3. Next slide. Central Business Zone. As I noted, when we looked at the zoning map, there is not C3 in the area, so staff recommended denying C3 and instead approving UGC. So the applicant, with their request, had said we would like C3 Central Business Zone and provided 15 conditions that would go along with that. And those are the standard C3 conditions that we've used over the years. Staff's recommendation was, because the UGC zone is already in place and allows the urban form that's described in the South Broad Plan, that is a more appropriate tool and can be done with the 3 conditions shown here in order to meet it. Also, it's 3 conditions instead of 15 is easier for enforcement and permitting. So next slide, please. There was no opposition at Planning Commission. Planning Commission had similar findings. There were quite a bit of discussion about the urban form of this development and thinking about those recommendations coming out of the South Broad Plan. So Planning Commission also recommends denying C3 for kind of all the reasons staff said, and the applicant was also found that acceptable. And is proposing, or Planning Commission came up with the following conditions. Residential uses only except ground floor commercial and office uses on 26th and 27th Street. And that's really to activate those streets. Active space facing the street on the ground floor. There was some discussion about ground floor parking. Again, Planning Commission thinking about how those spaces were used, use the term active space. And then a maximum of curb cuts along Cowart and Williams, unless additional curb cuts are required. So Planning Commission's recommendation takes staff recommendation a little bit further and really talks about making those active, walking down the street, you're seeing that activity, and that taking advantage of the frontage on 26th and 27th Street, but not all around the block. So the applicant found the UGC acceptable with the limited conditions, and I don't believe had any feedback at the conditions of Planning Commission.
Thank you. Welcome. You have any questions? Okay, all right.
And I'm remiss, I probably should have determined how many units are allowable under the existing zoning or all that zoning activity versus the 300 here, and I can provide that to you. That would probably be helpful.
Thank you, Karen. I think that brings us to our ordinances.
Okay. A few more slides. It'll say text amendments and
Do you have
resolutions.
something about this, Darren? About this case?
General question.
General question? Okay, hold on just a second, Karen. Oh, about the case we just discussed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Karen, I don't get a chance to talk to you as much as I used to, but maybe in the future we'll pick that up. So UGC, when we changed over to the new UGC pre-August 21, we're 4 stories, now we're at 5 stories.
Correct.
So my question is, are we seeing a lot of 5 stories being used, or are we conditioning those down from there?
We are seeing more five-story used, and I believe on this one, staff was recommending 4, and the applicant requested 5, but they weren't intending to use 5 over the entirety of the site. And so, but yes, we are seeing more 5 stories.
Very good, very
And I
good.
don't have a hard number on that. We've had a couple people at Planning Commission that wanted 5 stories.
Okay, maybe UGC should be relabeled DIA, do-it-all zone.
Well, we will hopefully fix that, but it is allowing some good urban development that's compatible with kind of what we'd like to see.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, and if we keep moving forward, it should say text amendments, just to get the text on your. Okay, next slide. So 6L is the amendment that permits existing two-family dwellings that were zoned R1 to be reestablished as two-family dwelling. This was something that Councilwoman Coonrod had requested us to look at a while ago. We developed a report. This is something actually the planning agencies looked at quite a bit over the years. So basically, as long as the structure is in full compliance with all adopted residential safety codes, the project can be the building can be brought back into conformity as a two-family dwelling. So we did have language in place, existing language is shown on your screen, that if power had been discontinued for 100 consecutive days, it could no longer be brought back as a duplex. So over the years, we've tried a variety of methods. We tried the special permit. We've tried a series of rezonings. Planning Commission had always supported this, looking at this 100-day item. I think they spoke to council about that many years ago. But this amendment, next slide. The proposed language talks about you can't, this is not intended to apply the construction of new two-family dwellings. These are only ones that were rezoned to R1 and then lost their conforming status. I believe, if I remember the report correctly, we might have 60 in the city that we know this would possibly apply to. But again, it requires compliance with property maintenance, fire, building, and other codes at the time, in an inspection.
Councilwoman Knoll?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So Karen, you said there are 60 in the city. Can you tell me where those 60 are located?
We have the report, and I can see if we've got them mapped. If not, I'm happy to get them mapped and make a map of that.
Okay, do you know how many is in District 8?
I do, if it's, I can't remember if that number's in the report, but if not, I will pull that and I can do the number by district and a map.
Okay.
And these were, we did a windshield survey trying to look at all the duplexes to kind of get a feel for that. But I'll pull the number, and we also got the list of ones that had been, were going through some sort of inspection by the city because they've been boarded up or condemned. I can also add that to the list.
I can add to that in the, because I have that in my documents. It looks like Councilwoman Knoll, vacant two-family dwelling structures in District 8, there are 15. And condemned or boarded up two-family dwelling structures in District 8, there are 18.
Thank you.
So this would affect that many.
So over half of them are in District 8?
Well, so I suppose condemned or boarded up, yeah. So you've got 18 plus 15.
Mm-hmm. And
Total.
I can show a map of
Total.
those and provide you any other information you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll double check my numbers. That was the number I believe we gave at Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Henderson.
Karen, so I think this addresses it. This is just, I guess, currently vacant properties. This wouldn't go back maybe to some point in time where a homeowner lost the R2 and maybe converted it to an R1. I mean,
We had that discussion, and I believe that Dallas said that's not a duplex. If it's been converted to a single-family house, that is not a vacant duplex. The use has changed.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess I just want to make sure there's some kind of language that, and maybe this, the word vacant, I guess. So we are only talking about vacant properties.
The intention is only vacant ones not ones that were vacant, and then they converted to a single-family house because that's all they could do because they were in the R1. The intention is you're vacant, you can't do anything with, a lot of them are sitting there because they can't bring them back as two families.
Well, I mean, I understand the intention, I just want to make sure the wording is very specific to which ones we're referring to.
Okay. We did get feedback from DRP, but I can go back and confirm that there doesn't need to be any tightening up of language. And so the concern would be, I had a single family, I maybe converted it, and now it's vacant, and I would like to go back to the duplex.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I didn't know if, to me, there's nothing that addresses specifically, I don't know, however many you just said. We know what we mean, but can we prove it if somebody comes and challenges that, is my only question.
Okay. We will take another look
Okay,
at it to see if there's some loophole that we're missing. We'll take a
Because
look at it.
I mean, I guess I can see, because this has been an issue in the past, I think I could see somebody coming and saying, I had an R1, an R2, but I lost I lost that designation because I was without power for 90 days, and I'd like to get it back because of this.
So in that case, if they had it, were not able to rehab the structure because they'd been without power, they would be able to reinstitute the use. Yes, if it hadn't been, I'm sorry. I thought you were using a duplex in your example. But you're saying if it had been used as a single-family house.
Well, I'm saying if it was a duplex and it had an R2 at one time, at any time in the past, and then it lost its designation as an R2, and now it's being used as a single family.
I understand.
Sure. Just the fact that they cut a hole through that
Right.
wall, and so they had access to both sides, it became
Oh,
a
right.
single family, but at one time, that had the designation of R2.
I understand, right. So if it's already converted to single family
Yes.
and has been that way for 10 years, that this is not the tool to then say, okay, well, you can go back and rehab it to get back to a duplex.
But we can prove it
I
with
will
this
double check.
language.
Dallas said,
Chris is shaking his head yes, so.
Yes, we discussed this at length.
yeah,
Okay.
we did discuss it, but I will confirm that with the DRP. But yeah, we did go through that scenario, and I think we were settled on that would not be a problem. We would be able to do it, but I will confirm how that
Okay.
enforcement would
And
happen.
our city attorney has something to add on that, if you'll just push your green button.
I've already had on there, it stays on for some
Oh,
reason up
super.
here. I believe you're protected in that regard, in this case, because it's talking about existing two-family dwellings as of the effective date of this amendment. So if it's existing at this point in time as a two-family dwelling, then it would continue to be able to be operating. If it was not continuing at this point in time, it would have lost that legal nonconforming use.
Okay. Thank you. Councilwoman Knoll, let me get you in here.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so I'm gonna make sure I'm understanding. They were duplexes, and then they were without power, so for more than 100 days. They cannot go back to duplexes
Currently.
So this ordinance is saying what was put in place, we want to go back and we want to backtrack and let them come back as duplexes.
So right now, if someone wants to continue to use it as a duplex, they have to apply for a rezone. And so this would say you don't have to apply for a rezone. You currently are a non-conforming, but historic non-conforming zone of R2. And it only removes the 100 days without power element. Dan, you look like you want to add,
No,
maybe you
I think
can.
you've got it right. Yes, we want them to become duplexes again and be someone, the owners to take the boards off, reinvest in them, and bring them up to a habitable structure. And I think that's the part here that we need to make sure we as staff, once we know that this is something the council supports, we need to work with Dallas and create a program where we're contacting those owners, making sure we know the process by which they become legal.
Okay.
Because, if that makes sense, because I think right now, it sounds a little loose, but we need to put in place some procedures that make sure that they bring them up to code.
Okay, so I hear we, this is what we want. What about what the constituents wanted when they had this put in place years back? I know for a fact Churchville, Bushtown area is probably all 15 of them are in that area, probably. The other 18, I'm not quite sure, but it was something that they didn't want anyway. So it was put into effect for 100 days. So now we're going back and reversing that and saying, okay, we let this go through forever how many years, and now we're going to go back and put it back to duplexes.
Well,
There's going to be a lot of unhappy campers.
Well, if I could just say, I think the intent is again to try to do away with vacant structures, which I would support an occupied structure, and then having a lot of vacant structures in one area obviously creates a residential area where there's not a lot of eyes on the street or families in the homes. And so I think this is trying to, fix the situation where we have a lot of vacant structures and try to occupy them. But we don't want it to be done in the wrong manner. I completely agree.
Well, there's a stereo that comes along with duplexes. So, once again, and I don't think that mindset and that stereo has been changed at all. Stereotype has been changed at all. So, in being the fact that they are located where they're located, I don't know how this is going to make the area any better. Matter of fact, it seems like to me it's going to be, I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot when we do that.
If we could maybe just, this is a good, I'm glad we're having this conversation, because I think as a good first step would be to have a community meeting with some of those folks, and we kind of explain it. And again, have Dallas and all of us here to understand where we're trying to get to. But I think doing that with the community as part of the process works for me, and I'm happy to be a part of that.
Councilman Coonrod?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for explaining what you all are wanting to have done. I think it's great because we have a lot of, duplexes that are just sitting vacant, idle. They're eyesores in our community, and people aren't investing in them to convert them to single-family homes. And I could think of the ones that have been done. A lot of those are now short-term vacation rentals that we're trying to say we don't want in our community. So for District 9, people aren't wanting houses with 4 and 5 bedrooms anymore. They're not having kids that's going to require that much space now. Right now we're in a housing crisis, so it makes sense to have those duplexes that have just been sitting there. And if Dan's LLC want to invest in rehabbing them back, fixing it, meeting the code qualifications, now there's 2 apartments. That's how I view it, 2 apartments for somebody to stay in, or 2 townhomes, or 2 condos. Like, we got to get out of the mindset of just calling it a duplex because it's in our communities, right? And as representatives, it's up to us to lead the discussion in a positive manner of what's best for the city of Chattanooga. And me personally, I don't feel like the best decision for our constituents is to continue to have these eyesores in our communities, and they're further declining, and people are needing places to stay. So as leaders, we need to be leading that discussion with our constituents
And although we hear what our constituents are saying, but sometimes they're in their own way of positive development that's happening in our community, and we're turning things down because of that. And then we see the continued results of how it's looking, the drug activity, the trafficking in our communities, the continued eyesores, and then we hear the complaints saying, oh, we need investment, we need improvements in our neighborhood, but yet we're continuing to champion the things that they saying that they don't want, that is not beneficial in our communities.
Madam Chair, may I make a comment too? A lot of the, the River to Ridge area was rezoned during that strategic neighborhood initiative, and we did a lot of downzoning from R2 to R1. I mentioned the Area 3 plan where some of those neighborhoods really opened up that mix of uses again and were, felt stable enough. That there was, opportunities for additional housing. We have a few that are not, that were still wanted that overlay, but I can also provide some information on where the duplexes are in relationship to the plan recommendations too, for Area 3. So we'll provide that also.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Knoll?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So let me say this. Sometimes it's not better to say this is better than nothing or this is better than what we have now. Sometimes it's just to get it right, period. Just don't have us to substitute or accept whatever just to make it look, to what? To put a coat of paint on it, to make it look better. Just get it right. Don't just put it in there and say, you can have this, because that we accept too much of that now in District 8. Just put over here what nobody else wants and you deal with it. It's better than what you have. Okay, so then I'd rather be without than have to say this is secondary to what you need. Let's just find something to make it right. It's got to be something other than bringing it back to where it was, because the chances of anything better coming into those duplexes than what was in there is slim to none. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Karen, doesn't look like we have, oh, yes, we do. All right, let's see. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, can you answer this maybe? Do we still have the program in place where you lived in one half of the townhome? And is that program still active with the city?
I'm not sure to which program you're referring, but
Jermaine,
I'm going to kill some time until Jermaine Freeman makes his way to the restored podium.
Jermaine knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so that program was for city-owned properties that that the city was able to take back because they were back tax properties.
Back tax properties.
And so we are currently in the middle of issuing an RFP and going through the RFP process. But I think I know where you're going.
Yeah.
Which is there sort of a common ground to address Councilwoman Knoll's concerns? And maybe one of the ways of doing that is having duplexes where you have an owner on one side and a renter on the other side, which I think where you were going, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, you've known me long enough. I was kind of flying that way. Yeah,
Sure.
As a suggestion. Okay, thank you.
But that is certainly something that we're exploring right now through the RFP process with the 3 duplexes on Milne Street that the city owns.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilman Hester.
Bring me to a better understanding. Are we talking about condemned, blighted buildings?
Excuse me. It does not make that distinction. There are condemned blighted buildings on the list we looked at just to see what the whole spectrum of everything out there. I don't know enough about once it enters like the condemned process where it would be in relationship to this. Excuse me. So I would think that it would include a condemned, or blighted building. Yes.
I beat Dan up here because I'm sitting closer than he is. On that topic, that's more of a DRP issue because there's no scenario with this type of duplex or any other type of rehab where you can, for lack of a better word, slap a coat of paint on it, put an extra door on it. They go through the entire inspection process that a new construction build goes through. They check for, current, which you just improved and increased, electrical standards, plumbing, mechanical, everything else. So these are not uninhabitable structures. They are essentially newly remodeled structures. And remodeled means actually rebuilt, not just some paint and a door and a new address.
And if I could just add, that's absolutely our intention, is to create to encourage the owner to have a financial incentive to improve the structure. But one of the things I would say is when we published the document, the report about the duplexes, was it back in December? It was probably in the holidays, and a lot of us didn't look into it. And we are happy to come back and go through that presentation so you can see that research because we did have someone go and take a photograph of every duplex that we're talking about and then categorize them by were occupied now, then we can talk about, what condition they're in. But again, the intention here is to create a program by which we get these properties from being vacant and boarded up into some kind of, beneficial structure to the community. I completely agree. We don't want to go back to a situation that was maybe worse in the past. We want to try to move forward. Absolutely.
Councilman Hester, do you have more to say?
No, thanks for clearing it up.
Okay. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Jermaine, no, you're good. I'm just going to say you were reading my mind as far as trying to find a way to get this into part of the mayor's affordable housing plan. And I'm just asking a general question. Could this be part of that $100 million investment? Is there some sort of path maybe we could explore to get these vacant structures into some sort of program, since there are so many of them, and try to create a piece of that puzzle? It's a general question. I don't expect an answer.
I'm going to say yes.
Yeah, all right.
So,
Look at that.
But I'm going to say yes. Now, it would all depend on the motivation of the property owner, because a lot of these duplexes are still privately owned.
Yes.
And so the property owner would have to participate, and they would have to be willing to participate. But we would certainly, I don't want to speak for Nicole, but she's working hard for us right now. But I think that Nicole and I would be very interested in bringing something like that to fruition.
Okay, and you mentioned the second part of that equation without, so you're now, what am I thinking now?
It's time for me to sit down.
Perfect, wow.
Before you sit down.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
A thought that I'm having as I hear this conversation, were we to expand this idea into some type of ownership with rental option, I think we would need to think about what happens with the next owner. So if that's a legacy product or not, which I think is where Councilwoman Knoll would be looking for a legacy of improvement on the property. Also, Mr. Noblett has suggested some language that I can provide to you, Karen, that relates to Councilman Henderson's question, suggesting that we could add some language that refers back to previous city ordinance numbers to cover the idea of certain things would not be subject to the loss of their legal nonconforming protection as of the effective date, and referencing back to some other ordinances that we've passed to help cover that. So I'll give you that.
Thank you.
I wonder, Chairman Ledford, might this be something that we would be interested in deferring? It's scheduled to be voted on for a first reading next week, but it sounds like there might be an appetite within the administration to look at it more.
I would be in favor of that, but I would point to this council and ask them, is this ready to go on? That would be, I think I'll defer back to you to ask that question, if it's ready to be placed.
Councilwoman Coonrod?
Thank you. I was just gonna mention that there's nothing in place that stops anyone from living on one side if they're the owner and leasing the other side. Like, people do that now. It's happening all across the district. But the thing that Jermaine is speaking about, that's separate. That's just for those properties that's on Milner Street. But again, for those that remember when they made the presentation, you have to get somebody to qualify to buy the property, to become, after it's fixed up or who's ever gonna do it, to buy the property, and then they can, so it's no special thing that the city is saying, oh, we're gonna create this. People are already doing it. And like I talked about NACA, like people can go through their process and they can, any home like that. So, I'm supportive of it, but, I would like for my constituents to feel comfortable with, supporting or not, or getting the information, additional information, or education sessions on it, so we could, defer it for another week or two to make sure everybody feel good about it.
Councilman Henderson?
That's really what I was going to say. I mean, I think, and I'm not sure that it affects a lot of my district. I'm not sure how many that I have in District 1, but I'd certainly want the constituents of 8 and 9 to feel comfortable with this program or with doing this and present it in such a way that it, and I don't know how they feel. I think I would rather have that place occupied as it to be condemned and uninhabited, vacant. How's that? I'll get it here in a minute. But I think, maybe this is a part of a bigger picture in creating a community trust to continue that generational wealth or legacy or whatever that we're really looking for. But I think it could all be part of a bigger picture. If we're going to defer it, maybe we need to look at it in that way.
Councilwoman Dotley?
Yes, thank you so much. And I sat here for a while because I wasn't sure if I was going to say anything, but for me, I grew up in a duplex in District 8. So some of the comments that about not being, what was there is not going to be better or something, for me, it's a little personal because that's what my mom could afford. That's what my aunt could afford in District 8 in her duplex. That's what my uncle could afford in District 8, still live in District 8 in a duplex, along with now some students I work with and things like that. I'm in favor of moving it forward because at the end of the day, people need places to stay. And we moved from one duplex to another duplex in District 8, a couple blocks over. And the one we moved to was a refurbished one. So when you talked about refurbished duplexes, when you talked about, they're not gonna be just, anything, there are people come in as code enforcement. And we were excited when we moved into this new refurbished duplex. So when I think about the people in District 8, the people that I know now, that everybody doesn't want, and to Councilwoman Coonrod's point, everybody doesn't want a big house, big bedrooms and all those things. Sometimes you just have you and your 2 kids and you need 2 bedrooms and you can't afford a mortgage or you can't afford that right now. But duplexes are an opportunity because now my mom lives in a house in District 8, but the duplexes afforded her the opportunity to take that step. And I think it's important that we look beyond what a duplex can produce because in that case, I'm an outcome of a duplex because we spent the majority of my life from 3rd grade to my senior year. That's what, 10 years, I think, 10 years or something like that. But I spent the majority of my life in a duplex. So I was excited when I saw this ordinance because I know, even the one, and actually I lived on Milne Street in a duplex. My sister lived on in a triplex, one of the triplexes on Milne Street. So I know how important they are. I lived in a duplex in District 8 when I first got out of college. Had my own duplex. So because I was familiar with them and knew where they were because of where I grew up. And now, I have a home. But it comes from broadening our perspective and really honing in on what Councilwoman Coonrod was saying. It's saying that, at the end of the day, it's about how can we help people move up economically? It's about economic affordability. So I'm 100% in favor of not deferring this, moving this forward. And if we need to come back and have those additional conversations, we can. But again, up until a couple years ago, I was in apartments, and before I moved into those apartments, the duplex helped me understand how to budget to move into an affordable apartment, then that to a house. So it's economic mobility to me. It's not just about, and because I saw my mom do it. So it's not just about nobody wants duplexes, because everybody has different circumstances. Everybody has different situations. And it doesn't mean somebody's bad just because they're in a duplex. It just means that they just may not have the economic resources at this time to be whatever they need to be. So, we can go whichever way I want to go. I just think we need to move it forward, because there are people right now that need somewhere to stay. And if we can get these back on the roll, these property owners contacted, get these things uncondemned, because District 8 isn't the only one that has duplexes. I have them in Alton Park. I'm sure Demetrius has those in her district. Everybody probably has some in their district. Yeah, so everybody has them. So we have to really look at it again to Councilwoman. I'm sorry to send all your points, Councilwoman Coonrod. But still, back to Councilwoman Coonrod's point about we have to look at what's better for the whole city. And helping people find somewhere to stay is important, and somewhere like a duplex is important because it helps people with the affordability. And nothing's, like she said, nothing's stopping them from somebody buying one, living on one side. I know someone doing that now, living on one side, renting the second side. So there are a lot of pros to this one that I really like. So back to the question I think Chairman Ledford asked, it's up to the council to move it forward. I'm 100% in favor of moving it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great discussion, everybody. I think based on the conversation that we've had, it would be premature to make any kind of decision to defer, but we'll have it on the agenda next week, and then we can make a decision then, once everybody's had some time to think about it. Yes, Chris?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for your comments. I'm pleased personally that you shared that story, and the administration agrees with your position on that. I'm here at the podium to offer something. If at any time this week or next, any of you would like a site visit to any of the duplexes that we're talking about, I can arrange for an inspector to meet us there, and we can talk about the inspection process and the things that are required to rehab and change those. Just if you'll let me know after the meeting or tomorrow or the next day, we'll set it up and we'll get you whatever information you need, regardless of if you defer this or keep it on the agenda, the offer stands.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have one more item.
That was Karen's idea. I didn't want to steal it.
We have one more amendment to talk about. It's a C2 ordinance amendment.
So the slide's not up, but the next ordinance amendment amends the C2 convenience commercial zone. It allows the reuse of existing hotel and motel buildings into multifamily residential buildings without requiring an increase in the minimum number of parking spaces. So we're doing this by removing the minimum lot area for dwellings and clarifying that parking requirement. We did discuss this at strategic planning a couple weeks ago. I know there was a lot of discussion. The ordinance before you is what was developed for Planning Commission, was recommended for approval by Planning Commission, and is moving forward. So next slide. And this is, again, showing the intent. The current language, which is at 7,500 square feet plus 2,000 square feet for each dwelling unit over one, is what gives us that 18 to 19 dwelling units an acre calculation. So it's kind of clunky, and we've talked about doing something different in the new zoning ordinance, but that's where we end up with that. It's the same calculation in the R3. But that's how we have that kind of standard 19 dwelling units an acre across the city. The urban general commercial zone, as you know, doesn't have that, and we've been using that as a tool to get developments over the 19 units an acre. I'm assuming this is just an older calculation. It's been in there for a long time, so we're removing that minimum lot area. And so a hotel motel conversion can be a 1-for-1 from a hotel motel to a housing unit, and there's no required increase in the minimum number of parking spaces. So that will not limit you on that.
Okay, Councilwoman Burrs.
Thank you. So I have I have several questions. The purpose of this, I think, came about because of the conversion of motels to living units. And if it comes about, then if someone buys a motel, there's a conversion by right. There is no discussion.
That's correct. It would be
All right.
allowed in the zone.
And the thing that I'm very much concerned about is creating immediate slums. I know of several right now that are just waiting for this without the thoughtful recognition that all housing, no matter whether it's low-end housing, rent-wise, or whatever, doesn't need to look like it. And the other concern that I have is that we have a whole new code coming up soon. I know the administration wants to get people housed, Chris, I get it. But what I'm trying to figure out is where is the protection from turning these into immediate slums where we've already seen several examples of them. My colleagues have talked about them in their district. And even though it was archaic and cumbersome, at least if there had to be a discussion about change, there could also be a discussion about conditions, all right? Councilman Ledford distributed several weeks ago some beautiful prints of what these could look like and how they could behave. And this leaves it wide open without anything else for the sorts of things that we're trying not to happen. So I'm not against it per se, but to just lob it out there without the protections, I think is dead wrong.
And I believe Chris would like to speak to that. I'll make, and it probably wasn't clear, so I apologize. A hotel motel can be converted to a multifamily unit if you can meet the density calculations. So I think we had an example of one that had enough space that they could almost do a one-for-one conversion if you can meet your density calculation. So it is the use is allowed, you can have both of those uses. This would remove it, so it would allow more units than most people's calculation would allow. But
I don't mind the units. And I'm not saying the way we do things now is correct. I'm not saying that at all. But there has to be some way we can protect our neighborhoods and our constituents. And we usually did that the archaic way by conditioning things. If it's a matter of right, then we have no say-so. And I know of at least two now that have come forward that have said, can't wait to do this, slap some paint on it, slap a burner in there, and here we go. We've already had problems with these, talked about one in District 5, some in the other districts. So I'm not against the concept. I'm talking about the protection from neighbors and neighborhoods, and the true protection for our citizens to have clean, decent places to live, not at the hands of slumlords. It's just that simple.
Thank you, Councilwoman, and thank you for our many discussions on this topic in the last few weeks.
Show me some protections, and I can, but there are none.
That's why I'm here, and as I promised you last week, I can tell you what are these steps in converting a motel to something residential. And this, just like the duplex question, is not as simple as a coat of paint and a new door. So if I own a motel on Brainerd Road and I want to convert it to apartments, let's say, when I start that process with the city through the remodel process, it is treated with the same level of inspection and requirements as a new construction. That means, once again, the new electrical codes that you just passed have to be followed in the new structure before it can get a CO for anyone to live there. They all have to have their own electric. There's a certain level that you have to do, even without those new code requirements, to go from a motel to an apartment. They all have to have their own electrical panel that they can access. They go, in most cases, nearly all cases, because of how large they are, they have to get sprinkled. They have to have smoke and in some cases carbon monoxide detectors for each unit. They have to,
Motels need that. They already have those, don't they?
well, when they were built, they did.
Well, some of them do. I'm talking about landscaping, I'm talking about quality of life. I'm talking about the sorts of things that we can do now because the discussion itself comes up. I'm
Right.
not saying it's the right way to do it.
We can add more. I can get you the full list that I have from DRP, the process of all, but you get all the inspections that you get with new construction. Plus you have to meet the new energy standards, which are difficult for some to meet. They will have to put a lot of money into the buildings. But the best way to protect quality of life and protect residents is not through conditional zoning. We're one of only a handful of cities in the entire state that relies on that. It is
totally
through
agree.
strengthening the regulations around building codes, which is what you have just done.
So can I build what you're saying right now, because it's C2, aesthetics aren't even in there.
They're not for new construction, for anything outside of a historic district.
So that was going to be my sort of just point to insert here is that, and by the way, I might disagree with Chris. I love conditional zoning. I mean, if the city does it, it must be right, so it's.
Yeah, of course it must be.
But I would
The
just say,
city's always right, yeah.
we agree on just about everything. But I have already spoken with Councilman Henderson and I'm starting a conversation with our city attorney about what does it mean to have commercial design standards and a design
Right.
review in our new code. Because I personally agree. I think we should get to decide, the council or city government should get to decide the appearance of a lot of things. Not everything, but in commercial districts, it just makes sense. I mean, so I think Chris is correct on everything, and I think having a condition that makes that look better than it does today is great. I'm
Okay.
not sure we can get through this amendment, but I mean.
So
it's not
I totally agree with Dan. And when we have the commercial design standards, then I'm all for it. But to go into the Wild West like this, to at least this way, we have a way to bring in the commercial design standards by requiring of that at the rezoning. We don't now. And hey, as quick as you can write up the design standards that are gonna be on, that you're talking about pushing, I can slap those on anything. But now, I'm not able to do anything like that. And the new laws are not retroactive. And let me ask you this, Dan, when is the new code, when is the new stuff coming out?
The new zoning update or the new?
Well, the new code, new draft.
Yeah.
Document. Karen, I'm waiting on Karen.
The hope is to have the public draft available by early June.
By early June?
A lot of it depends on our review of it, and we're about halfway through
So there are fine places here, like down at the Choo Choo or whatever, that make great design standards. They're great single room efficiencies. They're beautiful. They're wonderful. That's not what we're hearing from, unfortunately, the people that are trying to convert some of these places.
Well, and if there's some way to insert that with our attorney in the next, we're happy to try to create that process. I mean, if that's going to make this more palatable.
I may be in the minority here, but I just want to know on record that I agree with what the city wants to do. I don't disagree with any of it. It's that I would very much like design standards set with it. I mean, you all are good at this. But I've seen too many sad stories where later we say, oh gosh, we shouldn't have done that, just because we wanted to get people off the streets. So my 2 cents, I think there's a way to do it right, but I don't think it's with a wide open C2. Thank you.
Thank you. For IT purposes, Councilwoman Dotley's whole system is not working. So that's why I'm sharing a mic with her.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm just gonna echo some of the sentiments of Councilwoman Burrs. After hearing the stories we heard about the slumlord and the neighborhoods coming in, I think there's a missing layer of protection in here for communities. So if you wanna convert something, because I'm all for converting it, like she said, the choo-choo, there are some really nice places that have converted very nicely. But then you have those who aren't running a good ship now and want to convert later. So if there could be something within this that addresses that says, you've had 100 police calls this year, especially when you see domestic assault, rape, sex trafficking, you see all that on the list, and then here we are just letting them by right convert it over to an apartment unit. I don't think that's good for our citizens, because we don't know what they're gonna do once, they may be nice, but you never know how it's gonna go, because there's no true follow-up. And once we're done zoning something, a lot of times, we're just done with it. So something that addresses that, some stipulation or something that addresses some of these properties that have slumlords or management companies that have shown that they're not gonna do right. You can even probably get some of that from the police. They know where they are. They know which houses, which units they are, which buildings they are. And so being able to address that is very important, just because we see that on, 23rd Street, and we see it all over the place. So
Bonnie
Oaks, yeah. So it's all over. So just being able to, I think, if there was some protections in here for the community, some protections there, because I'm for affordable housing, for getting people somewhere to stay, but at the same time, the landlords have to have some type of accountability, and right now, this is just letting them slide on through and do what they want to do. So that's my commitment.
Certainly, and I would look forward to if the council has specific ideas about new requirements we can build in. Dallas and I met about this yesterday to talk about how we could add new requirements to the process. I will tell you that currently there's no way to just flip a switch and go from motel to apartment, even if you meet the current parking requirements and the current density requirements, which again is all this does, those two things. It doesn't do all these other things. There's no way to just do that. You've got to move everybody out. You've got to go through the inspection process. It's going to be empty for at least 6 months if you're lucky. You have to rebuild the thing just the way the building codes are written. You can't just change it. So what that does that we don't have now is it lets us send building inspectors into the structure that may be a problem today. And we don't get that opportunity if it just stays a motel and continues to be a problem because it's run down or whatever the situation is. We see this as an opportunity to reduce the number of blighted properties and to increase quality of life for the people who may choose to live there.
Councilman Hester.
I agree 100% with my colleagues. We definitely need to sit down and see what can we do as far as protecting the neighbors, the communities and all that. If we could sit down with you, Chris.
Absolutely.
Right. Great.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we were to rezone a property to UGC, what standards and design criteria come with that?
So if the property is undeveloped, the standards?
We did a C2 to a UGC. Does it come with design standards?
I would defer to DRP. The triggers to make that happen, I'm just not certain. I'm not familiar enough with it.
And I guess what I'm hearing is a valid and valid concerns. It's about quality, and I think we want quality, and I think it's okay to ask for quality. When I first met Dan, we talked about design standards, something I've mentioned in the conference room years ago, and it's kind of frowned upon, I think, by RPA at the time, but now it seems to come around and be an okay topic to talk about. It's okay to have standards, I think. It's okay to ask our developers to adhere to a level of quality that I think people deserve, and I think it's okay for us to ask for it. So I would encourage us moving forward to come up with a few of those, and then let's see if we can't get them implemented into this, and then build on it as we move into our next stage of rezoning, our rezoning laws. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilwoman Burrs.
With all that's being said, I would suggest that we consider deferring till we can have those discussions, not ad nauseum. We don't need to do that. I'm saying have a serious discussion, which can happen pretty quickly, and then get where we want to be, but it won't be by next Tuesday. So I would ask my colleagues that we consider deferring. We can either do it next week at the meeting or consider doing it tonight. I make a motion that we defer, vote it up or down, and then we can do it. I'll make the same motion next week. What would you like to do?
For how long?
You know, in this conversation, I do feel like we are talking about kind of two different avenues for things. We're talking about enforcement of our codes, of our life safety issues, and we're talking about zoning. When we talk about design standards, y'all, I just don't think that split-level ranches are the greatest thing that ever happened to Chattanooga. But a lot of people live in them and love them. Also, I don't know that beyond the Choo Choo project, we have an apples-to-apples comparison, because the projects that we're discussing that have caused such consternation and concern in our communities, and valid concern, are not apartment complexes. They are, in fact, motels that are being used in a way that is non-conforming with their business license. So I see that as two different conversations. And I don't know that adding a boxwood shrub in front of a building makes a dramatic difference in a person's quality of life, or taking away a parking space for a car that doesn't exist for a tenant that has a long-term lease that also has tenant rights. And tenant rights do make a significant impact on quality of life. So if this body is interested in a second to the motion to defer, then obviously I will accept that.
Second.
All right, then we can vote on that. Councilman Ledford, do you have something to add? You're live.
No, ma'am, I'm good.
Okay. Do we have a consensus that we'd like to defer this?
Well, I've got to ask you, I want to defer it for whatever time. If you say 1 week, fine. If you say 2 weeks, fine. I just don't care.
2 weeks. Two additional weeks if we can.
2 weeks, please.
2 weeks? Do we have a consensus on that by a head nod?
28th.
Councilman Henderson, you're not nodding or shaking.
I'm
not nodding or
listening
shaking
to the
either.
discussion.
All right, we'll defer till the 28th. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, let's adjourn till 6. Thank you, Karen.